Hi there, welcome back to the Grape Explorer. In this series of videos we are taking a detailed look at WSET Level 2. This is part 5, so if you haven't checked out the other parts in this series, be sure to do that. And if you're new to this channel, welcome. I'm the Grape Explorer. On this channel you will find wine education, product reviews and lots of wine tastings. So let's jump straight into part 5, which of course is about Learning Outcome 5. Now, Learning Outcome 5 is all about understanding the production processes that can influence the styles of sparkling and fortified wine. So our focus today is going to be on questions around the likes of champagne, prosecco, sherry and port. And Learning Outcome 5 has a number of individual assessment criteria to it. They are as follows. You need to be able to identify the key grape varieties used to produce the principal styles of sparkling wine. You need to be able to identify the key stages of the winemaking processes used to make sparkling and fortified wines. You need to be able to identify the key geographical indicators for sparkling and fortified wines, as well as being able to describe specific styles of sparkling and fortified wines. And then finally, as with the other assessment criteria, being able to state the meaning of labelling terms, which might indicate style or quality. So what you'll notice here, these are quite similar in their approach to that which we've covered for the principal grape varieties as well as the regionally important grape varieties. So we're going to be looking at similar question structures when it comes to sparkling and fortified questions. Assessment criteria 1 therefore is all about identifying the important grape varieties used in sparkling and fortified wines. You're going to be learning that Chardonnay, Pinot Noir and Pinot Meunier will contribute to the production of certain sparkling wines. Moscato, sometimes known as Muscat, contributes to sparkling wines, as well as Glera, which of course is used in the production of Prosecco. And so some typical examples of questions you might expect to get, which are based around the grapes used in different styles of sparkling wines, are as follows. Which of the following grapes would you not find in Champagne? Would it be Chardonnay, Pinot Gris, Pinot Noir or Pinot Meunier? And I actually think this is quite a tricky example of a question. And the reason for that is sometimes at WSET Level 2, you can immediately pick out 2 incorrect answers. But because we've used Pinot Noir, Pinot Meunier and Pinot Gris here, I actually think this one makes it a little bit more trickier. The answer is of course that we would not find Pinot Gris, that is not used in the production of champagne. But let's move on to another grape used for a particular style of sparkling wine. Glera is used in the production of what? Is it port, champagne, sherry or prosecco? And I think this is probably an easier example of a question you might get. We're talking about assessment criteria 5, which is all about sparkling and fortified wines, but we already know that this specific part of the learning outcome is just about sparkling wines, so we can immediately discount port or sherry, and that leaves us with just a couple of choices, and the Glera grape is what goes into the production of Prosecco. And then finally, another question along similar lines, just to get you used to this style of question. So sparkling Asti is made from what? Is it Chardonnay, Glera, Muscat or Pinot Noir? And the way to approach this question of course is to use your powers of deduction. We've already had a question about champagne, we've already had a question about Prosecco, and we've covered off some of the grapes that you would see there. So in the case of this question there really is one only correct answer left, and that is of course Muscat, also known sometimes as Moscato. And with a basic understanding of the grapes under our belt, let's move on to assessment criteria number 2, which is where you need to be able to identify the key stages of the winemaking processes used to make sparkling and fortified wines. So we're going to cover off both sparkling and fortified here, and when it comes to sparkling wines, we're going to be using the bottle fermentation method, also known as the traditional method, as well as the tank method, which can make dry and sweet styles. And then from a fortified wine perspective, when it comes to sherry, you'll learn about fortification after fermentation. You'll understand what it means where the wines are in contact with flor for aging, as well as what it means to when wines are in contact with oxygen for aging. And then finally for port, fortification to interrupt fermentation and aging are some of the processes that you're going to cover off as part of this course. But let's get into some of those all-important questions that you might get asked along these lines of production. So in champagne production, what does it mean to disgorge? Is it that part of the production where you are blending wines? Is it the part of production where you're adding yeasts? Perhaps it's adding sugars? Or is it where you're removing the yeasty deposit from the bottle? You will, of course, as part of the course that you undertake, go through all of the key stages in champagne production. And disgorging is one of those processes that takes place later in that journey of the traditional method. And it is in fact the removal of the yeast. So once those bottles have been riddled and then put into an upright inverted position, that's actually where you're taking that yeast out of the bottle and getting ready really for the final stages of the production journey. So the answer is to remove the yeasty deposit from the bottle. Let's take another look at a question on a true or false style. The tank method will produce a style of wine that is more complex than traditional method with bready and biscuity aromas. Is that true or is that false? Now, of course, the tank method is a much different process to the traditional method. The traditional method allows for a second fermentation to take place in bottle, which means the yeasts in that bottle during second fermentation are obviously much more concentrated than they would be if production took place in a large tank. And that's why you get different aromas coming from this. The traditional method with which we would associate champagne, and then the tank method, which is much more associated with the likes of Prosecco. And of course, they have incredibly different flavour profiles. So the question of whether it's going to produce a wine that's more complex with bready or biscuity aromas is actually in this case false. Now for another question around a specific process as part of the overall journey. So what is dosage? Is it the amount of yeast added? Is it a tool for measuring the bubbles? Is it the amount of sugar added, or is it the removal of yeasts? Well, I think we can discount a couple of these immediately. You know, we just had a question about the removal of yeasts, and that was a process known as disgorging. Why somebody would need to measure the bubbles is beyond me. Perhaps that happens, but it's certainly not covered at level 2. So you're left with, is it the amount of yeast added or is it the amount of sugar added? And the correct answer is actually that it's the amount of sugar added. And the dosage can really have an impact on the labelling terms for champagne. If we think about things like extra brut, brut, demi-sec, these are all important labelling terms that relate to the amount of sugar that you will find in that wine. Now, another question about production methods. So which of the following is true? Is it that the traditional method undergoes a second fermentation in bottle? Is it that the tank method produces bready aromas? Is it that the Asti production typically uses the traditional method, or is it that all of these are true? And again, I know we've just had some questions that are obviously going to help inform your answer here, but this is a really typical example of a question you would get at level 2 because it's getting you to think about the varying production methods for sparkling wine. We know that the traditional method undergoes a second fermentation in bottle. It's a more complex method, so we know that one to be true. Now, moving away from production methods, we're going to be moving on to assessment criteria number 3. And this is where you need to be able to start to identify the key geographical indicators for sparkling and fortified wines. And some of these are clearly going to appear quite obvious. You know, France, Champagne, Italy, Asti and Prosecco, Spain, Cava. But you will look at other countries as part of this learning, and some of those other countries that you will cover off are places like South Africa, Australia, New Zealand and the United States. And then of course our fortified wines, we know our sherries come from Spain, we know our ports come from Portugal. So that isn't too difficult in terms of where these things are produced. And as a result of that, you know, some of the questions that you get at level 2 associated with where is something made, I personally find that little bit more easier. I think there are harder learning outcomes than this particular one, particularly around geographical indicators. Therefore, let's take a look at some example questions, and I think you'll see what I mean by that. So Asti is made where? Is it Italy, France, South Africa or Spain? Now you only have to go back to the previous card to know that we covered off Asti as a geographical indicator for Italy. I do think that this is a simpler example of a question. But now when you're learning about where the countries are associated with the various styles of sparkling wine, you will also learn about the types of methods that are used to produce those. So let's look at a true or false example here. Cava is made in the tank method. Is that true or is that false? Now, Cava is something I absolutely love, and one of the reasons for that is it's very accessible price-wise, but it's made in that more expensive traditional method that champagne undergoes. So I really love Cava because it is not made in the tank method, that's false, but you still get some of those more complex aromas that I really enjoy in a sparkling wine. Now, talking about some of those styles you might expect from a sparkling or fortified wine, let's move on to assessment criteria number 4, where you're starting to look at the various styles that are available. So for sparkling wines, when we had the question about dosage, I was talking about things like brut, demi-sec, certain styles, dryness of the wines. You'd be able to differentiate between a vintage or a non-vintage. And you'll also be covering off traditional method as a style, but also something called method cap classique, which is what traditional method goes by in South Africa. Then on the fortified wines, you've got a number of different styles of sherry. Some of them are going to be dry, some of them are going to be sweet. And then when it comes to port as well, you're also going to have different styles dependent upon some of the production methods that the wines have gone through, going through things like ruby to tawny and all the various styles in between. And what you'll do, of course, as part of your coursework is you will be tasting examples of sherries, ports, sparkling wines. And as you're doing that tasting, of course, you're getting familiar with the various styles of those wines as well. So your tasting notes and your revision of those tasting notes when it comes to the exam are really going to help you with your questions and answers. And next up, we've actually got a question that's very much along those lines. So which of the following would be an accurate description of an Oloroso sherry? Would it be pale lemon with bready aromas? Would it be light ruby with red fruit aromas? Would it be deep purple with black fruit aromas? Or would it be deep brown with nutty aromas? What you need to do as part of this question is to recall the production methods for Oloroso sherry, because that's going to help you understand the colour that might come out of it, but also some of those all-important aromas. Now, Oloroso sherry is an oxidative produced style of sherry, and that means you're going to end up with more nutty type aromas. So the correct answer here is deep brown with nutty aromas. Next up, we're going to stay on the theme of sherry, gets used to some of those fortified wine type questions. So which of the following is a sweet style of sherry? Is it Oloroso, is it pale cream, is it fino, or is it late bottled vintage? Now, when you go back to your labelling and your production methods, late bottled vintage is not associated with sherry, so we can immediately discount that one. We're then starting to recall what the sweeter styles are now. Fino sherry is a dry style. Oloroso is a dry style. So that only really leaves us with one option, and that is pale cream. And let's have one final question here. Which of the following is a common labelling term for port? Is it LX, PX, VSOP, or LBV? Now, I think when it comes to the labelling terms here, I've thrown in a bit of a curveball, because VSOP you actually would associate with spirits and not with wines at all. LX is not a labelling term that you would expect to see, but PX and LBV are labelling terms, but the key here is to guess the right style of wine, because PX is a labelling term you would actually associate with sherry. So the correct answer here is LBV for port. That means late bottled vintage. That would be the correct answer. So there we go. We've had a little look there at learning outcome number 5, getting you familiar with sparkling and fortified wines. As I said at the start of this video, don't forget to check out the other parts in this series, but I'll see you next time for part 6. For now, I'm going to say I'm the Grape Explorer. See you again soon. Cheers.